Greetings, fellow Star Trek fans, and welcome to Captain's Yacht, a Star Trek podcast run by two inner-city high school teachers evaluating the Star Trek universe through the lenses of history and literature. A little reminder before we beam aboard the Captain's Yacht: if you like what you see or have feedback for us, please like, share, subscribe, and comment, and we'd love to hear from you. So, let's beam aboard the Captain's Yacht and see what we're talking about today.
Season 1, Episode 18, Home Soil, Stardate 41463.9. What's going on in this episode called Home Soil? Let's talk about it. So the Enterprise witnesses a terraforming operation led by a less than forthcoming scientist who both has secrets and an ego the size of the main shuttle bay. Hey! We never actually get to see the main shuttle bay in TNG, but it's big. And yeah, this scientist has a giant ego and a secret, and yeah, let's talk about it. So this is a classic episode of Trek. This is a space anomaly, first contact mission. It's a non-corporeal entity. We've had that before on Lonely Among Us. And we don't have an evil admiral, but we certainly have another Star Trek trope, and that is a Starfleet jerk. So, and that would be the terraformer, whose name escapes me, but he's not called Doctor in this for some reason. I don't know why that is. Kurt Mandel. So, Captain, tell us what happens in this very exciting episode about terraforming a planet only to run into its indigenous life. What's going on behind the scenes here?
So this is the last episode Gene Roddenberry supervised as head writer. At this point in production of first season, Roddenberry and Maurice Hurley argued so much that Hurley gave Roddenberry an ultimatum. Because of Roddenberry's deteriorating health at the time, Hurley basically said, "I will take over this entire show if you leave. You got to leave the show, but I will do everything you say." Yeah, so this is the turning point. This is where Roddenberry gives up his power, his formal power, and gives it over to Maurice Hurley.
It's kind of sad, honestly.
Yeah, Roddenberry went on a vacation to Tahiti with his wife Majel. Hurley went so far as to book his reservation so he would leave the show. He basically said, "I will book your ticket. I will book your reservation in Tahiti. Just go."
Dang, Maurice Hurley, cold. Wow.
So yeah, that's his deal there. Oh, we're gonna get into a lot of Maurice Hurley when we get into season 2. He's an interesting character. So that's the deal there. That's where the handoff happens. That's where the turning point happens. With all that in mind, we take a look here, and the writers struggled a lot in approaching this episode because they felt the existential questions they were trying to tackle were too similar to Encounter at Farpoint, where this strange new life, and they're trying to make contact with it. So as a result of that, writers were working on pages to shoot, and the director would only get the pages only the night before each shooting day. So it's very similar to what happened with Angel 1. Not quite as bad as Angel 1, where if you saw
not quite
with that, where so much of the story falls apart, but they did have similar problems there. So with that said, taking a look at what works there, for me at least what works, is this kind of ties into what Q had dropped down in Hiding Q, where he talks about humanity basically exceeding where they are now and start dabbling in omnipotence and having the same abilities as the Q, in this case changing the landscape of a planet for their purpose. So it strikes a very interesting, and the whole concept of this episode really hits at Roddenberry's thesis, which is so appropriate because this is the last episode Roddenberry served as head writer, where humanity is constantly improving itself, but it's not perfect. It still makes mistakes, and it's able to own up to a certain degree to those mistakes once they realize that errors were made.
Hey, just
So
like our people in the last episode, the Aldeans.
exactly, and everything the Kryptonians didn't do in DC. So
Yep, you're right
there
about
you
that.
go. There you go. So that's the deal there, where it's the central question about what qualifies as life that also pushes the boundaries of human understanding,
Oh yeah,
which
oh
is
yeah.
very Q-like if you go all the way to the end of the show with all good things. Um, the
Yeah.
taking a step out of the human perspective and looking at things in a broader standpoint.
Yes.
I also found it very odd that they didn't mention the Project Genesis from Wrath of Khan. There's absolutely no mention to that, and that device is basically
Hmm.
the ultimate terraforming tool. I wonder
Yes.
why they didn't bring that up. Probably
That's
because of the
interesting.
writing. Yeah, the writing pressures that they had in developing the script. They didn't mention that.
Yes, yes, that's probably, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're writing this script, that doesn't, like the day before you shoot, that doesn't give the showrunner a lot of time to look at continuity and such, you know? So I can definitely see that. Okay, so some things that are working out for me in this one, like you talked about, we're looking at the Roddenberry's thesis about improving ourselves. One way we're trying to improve ourselves and better ourselves as human is, understanding this process of terraforming, which is, us trying to understand the process of making, life in a way, making a planet habitable, which is kind of a metaphor for, creating life, or kind of a new type of life too. There are lots of interesting questions that come up for me when I'm thinking about terraforming in this episode. On the one hand, I think that terraforming is like kind of an amazing scientific process to kind of to make, like a dusty rock habitable. That seems really cool. But on the other hand, this episode reminds us that we don't necessarily know that all there is to know about intelligent life and how it may manifest on a quote unquote dusty rock. So I think that's really some of the questions that this episode asks, again, kind of like the last one, the questions that it raises are fascinating to me. Does it execute it in a very exciting way?
Oh
Not
goodness,
exactly.
no.
Not exactly. Yeah. So again, I was talking about colonization and the other one with bringing the families on board. But to me, terraforming really feels like colonization. Like you are going out and you're establishing a colony slash outpost slash entire planet. So that's like one thing to make your presence felt in space, send a spaceship. Another thing, have a star base. Another thing, terraform a planet really far away from your origin planet. To me, that is very colonization. But there's so much space in space. Colonization is kind of an issue when you're stealing land from someone who's already there, and ostensibly there's way more planets than there are, intelligent species that can inhabit them. So I'm kind of all over the place on this, but at least that human aspect is on my mind, the colonization part. Um, yeah. So what else is on your mind about what works on this? I know you're thinking about some of humanity's imperfections that are going to manifest, and that comes out through some of the characters. What are you thinking there?
Right. So basically, it's the main antagonist, I would argue, is very much in his own perspective and is unable. It's almost a sort of cultural or species myopathy where they cannot see beyond their own perspective there. So
Yeah,
humanity can make mistakes by assuming that life should only fit one criteria, and then they realize that's not the case, and that it's one of those things, and this is something that I would argue that modern science fiction in all franchises seems to struggle with, where it's okay to give your protagonists, especially, flaws.
yeah,
It is okay to do that. That makes them more interesting. And seeing how these characters realize we were wrong, there
yeah.
is intelligent life on this planet, we need to make peace with them, and everybody grows as a result of that. That's the stuff that arcs are made of. That's the stuff that makes the characters' journeys interesting, and that's the one of the biggest issues I have with modern science fiction, where the writers straight up forget that maybe it's because of the onset of the superhero, but character protagonists in modern science fiction right now can't seem to have any flaws whatsoever, and that doesn't make
And
for interesting sci-fi. Go ahead.
And antagonists will never be more than just revenge seeking, frothing at the mouth, shooting you with lasers, and then they die. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
It seems
yep.
like this antagonist actually is a person when all is said and done. Again, admits flaws. Maybe that's not interesting to people watching New Trek, but when every antagonist just goes to their grave, screaming about revenge, like that just makes antagonists not very interesting at all. So, yeah, having people with flaws and then recognizing those is interesting.
Yep.
Just something you have to point out. I'd also like to say that the actor who plays Kurt Mandel, I think his name is Walter Gottel, a longtime Bond actor. He's awesome. His performance is pretty good. He plays a very egotistical jerk scientist very well. And he even comes around and is sympathetic, and he does that that's great range in 44 minutes. You know what I'm
Mm,
saying? I really appreciate that about him. Like you say, when those antagonists and they slowly come around, first like the assistant comes around, and then at the very end, the director of the project comes around. Yeah, I think that is some phenomenal acting, great range, great performance, and again, an interesting antagonist, even though didn't end the episode shooting a laser screaming about revenge for him not getting to witness his life's achievement or something like that.
definitely. That's definitely worth it. That actor's range. I am a major Bond fan. Bond means just
Yeah.
as much to me as Star Trek does, for reasons I'll explain probably
Wait.
when we get to our nemesis. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this guy, who does he play? Admiral or General
I will pull it
Gogol
up. I will point
in
it up real quick. I can look it
yeah.
up while you talk about what
I
doesn't work
know
for
he's
you.
in the Living Daylights. I guarantee he's in the Living Daylights. I will I'll stake
He's in
some of my
Bermuda.
scholarly.
Yeah, he's General
He's in like
Gogol.
6 of them.
Yeah,
General Gogol, yes.
he's the Soviet general from the Octopussy. Oh, even Moonraker. My goodness,
Yeah, he's in a couple,
Moonraker.
yeah.
Yeah, he's in the Roger Moore era.
Is he in
And
Living Daylights? Oh gosh.
let's find out real quick. But as I'm pulling that up, what doesn't work for you, Scholar Beta, about
Yes,
all
yes,
this?
yes. Yes. What doesn't work for me is spending about 15 minutes looking at two blinking lights that are in a fishbowl. Okay. 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 So. Um, it's not that that's not interesting. And okay, so I will say one positive thing about the quote unquote microbrain, the new life that is discovered, right? There's something going on in the space station. They don't know what it is exactly. It's a mystery. And basically, dun dun dun, they discovered an intelligent life that's trying to defend itself. Hence it taking over the drill and shooting at the people who were terraforming the planet. Okay. So, how do they represent this intelligent life? Well, they represent it as a blinking Christmas light in a fishbowl. And that would be fine. That would be fine. But then they like double down on it and they do two blinking lights. I'm really getting a meme. There are two lights here. And then there are four lights every time it multiplies. And to me, they just spend way too much time talking to these blinking lights. And the part that really breaks it for me is not just that they're like, oh my God, fascinated by these blinking lights, but the voice too. I hate the voice of Microbrain. Why did they do this? Why did they make it sound like a alien robot from the Universal Translator? Why could they just not have Majel Barrett's voice translate it? That'd be, as the Enterprise computer, that'd be so much cooler and wouldn't horribly break my sense of disbelief, because I'm already not believing that Patrick Stewart is enjoying himself talking to these blinking lights. So I'm just a little obsessed with that production design choice. I don't like it. I'm kind of critical of it.
May
It's
I
not. I don't
Sorry.
know, man. It's just not my favorite thing. It's just not my favorite thing.
May I
Um,
may I give
yes.
you a counter
Update.
perspective to that? Okay,
Oh
two things.
yes,
First of
yes,
all,
yes.
yes, he did play Anton Gogol in Living Daylights,
Yeah, I knew I recognized him.
which
Just watched that
which
Bond movie
came
too.
awesome. It came out in 1987. Living Daylights did. This episode came out. This episode in which he plays Kurt Mandel came out in 1988. So
Yeah,
he pretty much did both, one right after the other.
excellent.
Regarding your critique,
Of the
the
microbrain's voice
yeah,
or production design or all of it?
both. I'm willing to write that off because of budget. The flashing light.
Yeah, yeah, sure, of course, of
And
course.
I have an explanation regarding the universal translator.
Go for it. Yes.
In I want to say it's the original series episode Metamorphosis, where they explain that the universal translator makes assumptions as to male and female voices.
Mm.
There is a line that says there are certain indicators in the universal translator which makes assumptions about male or female characteristics, and that's how they're able to tell that the cloud is female with Zephyr Cochrane. The fact that it's robotic indicates another layer of the thing that humans can't understand. This doesn't fit humanity's basic understanding of life, because even if they could apply gender to a non corporeal cloud, they're able to understand that, but that yet they give basically the early version of Siri's voice to the microbrain. So I'm able to buy those two things because number one, it's a matter of budget, and as established, this episode had a terrible production,
Yes.
abysmal production, and secondly, thematically, I bought it because the mechanisms that we use to understand humanoid life fail us in this case because it's a form of life we haven't seen yet and don't understand. So, but
Yeah.
I go ahead.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm with you on that, and for the budgetary reasons, for my love of the show, I can look past that. You know, I had to actually kind of dig it for something to be critical of this episode. I'm not gonna lie. Besides its pacing, you know, but yeah. So I was just kind of caught up on that production decision there. But then, you know, okay. So let's say there is some thematic thing about we just can't understand that. I'd actually argue that Picard and Beverly do understand it. Like their whole
Yeah.
mission is to seek out new life, and they get it pretty much right away. I think it's really Kurt and his team that didn't really get it or didn't have that perspective. But there's one more thing that annoys me about the blinking lights, and it's that a lot of the fourth and fifth act could have been solved if they just beamed it back to the surface before it got so powerful that they couldn't beam it back anymore. You know what I'm saying? It's like, remember, Picard, in the future you're going to say imprisonment is a form of injury, and that's basically what you're doing to these poor blinking lights. You know, they just want to be blinking on the surface. They don't want to be blinking in your medical bay, you know? So like, please send them back. Like, I get that you want to study them, but like maybe study them on the planets. I don't know. That part just seemed weird to me. Like, just send them back, send them back. You know they're intelligent, send them back. You don't want to imprison them. And then they finally do it and they can't. I just think, like you said, that was probably a writing issue that came up from the script not being developed. So they just, oh, we know we need to beam these things back, but we got to delay this scene because we need to stretch this episode out for a couple more minutes. So yeah.
Exactly. No, that's a really good point, and oh gosh, them establishing, and this ties into my gripe. We've seen this kind of episode before, and it's been done better.
Yeah.
This kind of episode where it's life, Jim, but not as we know it episode, where the crew comes across a potentially evil life form, but it's simply misunderstood. Now, the writers, as documented, had a lot of issues trying to make this episode different from Encounter at Farpoint, and they tried to make some connections there. I think a more apt comparison is the original series episode Devil in the Dark, the one with the Horta. Because in both episodes, a death happens on an industrial installation on an uncharted world. The Enterprise crew suspects malice and then realizes that it's a life form acting in its own self-preservation. Yep. And that's basically the story there. And considering that, once again, this is the last episode that Roddenberry handled as head writer formally, that's an interesting, the connection there becomes all the more stronger. From my perspective, here's why Devil in the Dark is better than Home Soil. From a production standpoint, Devil did a better job at playing up the existential fear factor with very deliberate directorial decisions, like point of view shots of the creature to have the audience physically see the demise of the characters it consumes. Home Soil,
yes,
it's just a bunch of off-screen shouting effective potentially, but not as effective as the POV shots in Devil. Also, Devil in the Dark is a lot more efficient at explaining how the Horta is a life form. This is one of those things
Mm.
that you pointed out, Scholar Beta, where it broke. I attribute this to the script breaking down. It takes almost 2 acts in Home Soil to do what Devil in the Dark does in a couple of minutes. And
Yes.
yeah, so that's
Just
the deal.
efficient pacing is not what this episode is about.
Good point there. The creature design, you talked about that. We'll cop that up to the budget point. Also, comparing this episode to another scary but misunderstood and non corporeal life form, there's a Voyager episode called The Haunting of Deck 12.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there are attempts where they try to do scary stuff where it's like, we can't beam it out. The computer is taking control of the computer. Rock one way, the crew rocks the next way.
Yep.
Um, that episode, the Voyager episode, The Haunting of Deck 12, effectively uses the light and spooky effects, the involuntarily open and closing doors. That one, when I first saw that episode, I was like, that's kind of scary because you see the doors just open and close with flickering lights, and that doesn't cost anything to do. You want to talk budget, you can do that on the cheap. That's one of
Yeah.
the reasons why scary movies are so cost effective. They're essentially
Absolutely.
um, but the Voyager episode does a far better job of show don't tell, and I think a little bit of that would have gone a long ways if they did want to do if they wanted to fully commit to the life form is taking over the ship. They could have gone that way, and the beautiful thing about that, from a production standpoint, is it's cost effective. So
Yes, yes. I think they spent money on Velara 3 station. I think they spent money. That's probably on some of their guest stars. So that's where their money went this episode, because it most certainly didn't go to the intelligent life form.
definitely not. But I still maintain, if you want to do scary is cheap.
You can do it on the cheap. Yes, absolutely. Look at those. Gosh, what is the one that's famous for jump scares? There's like Paranormal Activity.
Yep,
I mean,
Activity,
just go look
Blumhouse.
at. I don't. Yes. Wow. 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 That's all. That's all. Because it's about mood. Mood and atmosphere and tone, and those aren't the most costly part of your production usually. You know, special effects, actors, sets, marketing, all that good stuff.
Excellent.
Okay.
That's a good point. Are we ready for first and facts?
I think so. I think so.
Wonderful. So this is Hurley's first act as head writer, and there tends to be a phrase that Hurley brings up a lot. I brought it up in previous episodes, but he calls this episode an interesting idea, but the execution fell apart.
I like that.
Said,
I like that.
yeah, he says the same thing about Code of Honor, I might add, and he's going to say that a couple more times. That's his favorite phrase. I'm just pointing that out. In addition to the writer struggling with the episode, there were a lot of logistical breakdowns. They had trouble setting up the cast. The fact that they were able to get that Bond actor is really good.
Yes. Yes.
That's definitely a good get. But setting up the location, setting up the sets, meeting deadlines for shooting, the whole thing was just totally fell apart there.
I wonder if that actor was like in the United States for some Bond or something related to that, or I don't know. I just
that
that's
might be that actually.
I don't know,
be
because that was a year before, so.
So I got some awards here real quick. Basically, the Dollar Tree Award, and that Dollar Tree Award goes to the Christmas light microbrain.
I know. It is a Dollar Tree prop. It is. I swear. I wasn't going to harp on it, but you brought it up. Its second form, is even goofier almost. It's like a Dollar Tree glow-in-the-dark thing.
There you go. So are you ready for your awards, Scholar Beta?
Oh, and I've got 2, and I love both of them so much. First, our matte painting, the terraforming station on Velara 3. It's a beauty. I really appreciate that. It kind of looks like you got like the Mars kind of soil color there, and that kind of indigo black background, and then the station itself is pretty interesting. I love those little cutouts they put in there to try to give it some animation and movement with some crew inside. That's really cool. And And so I would like to see more terraforming in action. I never actually thought that a terraforming station would be on the planet's surface. I always assumed it was sort of hovering and like shooting a laser down to change things in the atmosphere. But what do I know? This is probably like the studying phase of it before that happens. But anyways, yeah, let's talk about interiors for this one. We're going back to sick bay, which is deck two, as y'all know. And instead of the special operating theater where Data was put back together, or Laura, my bad, this time we're going to use a different part of sick bay, and it's the medical lab. And as you can see there, we have the kind of the upside down fishbowl over the blinking lights where the crew and with the containment field around it, and the crew is all standing there looking at it, asking themselves, what exactly are we supposed to be looking at? And then we have the reverse angle with all those computer display and terminals in the background. So I like the medical lab. I was thinking Crusher, she gets some awesome sets. She's got her office. She has sick bay proper. She's got special medical rooms, this lab, the operating theater. Yeah, she's got some really cool sets she's working with. Maybe not as cool as the bridge in the ready room, but still very cool.
Very, very cool. So, really good points there. And I hadn't thought about that with the sickbay interiors, but this is one of the first times we see the medical lab. So,
Yes, it is.
awesome. With that said, as we're wrapping up and going back to the mothership, a little bit of teaser. Next time on Captain's Yacht, we are doing our first outing regarding the Star Trek universe of the Picard series, season 1 on CBS All Access. That one I've been looking forward to for a long time, and I'm glad we finally get to talk about it. I should point out that we are planning 3 episodes to talk about Picard and the Kurtzman universe as a whole. If you, the audience, would prefer us to do a longer take on it, we definitely can. But that's our first outing in the Picard universe. So, with that said, Scholar Beta, I think we have some thank yous in order.
Yeah, as always, want to give my love to Memory Alpha for helping me spell all these planetary names, character names, getting them all correct, fact checked. Really appreciate all the hard work that's done over there. Trek Core, as always, love reading those scripts. That's basically now a part of my weekly prep for this show is checking out the Trek Core, comparing the Blu-rays to the screen caps that I'm taking on my computer, seeing kind of what the detail looks like. Someday I'll own those Blu-rays. Not today, though. And also Trek Core, like I said, whoever found all those scripts and put them up there, that's awesome. I love that. I love reading about it. It might not be the absolute final version, but there's some history there from a historical perspective. Those documents are pretty invaluable and really getting into the details of these episodes. So love to both those sites, and of course all of our viewers, all of our new subscribers, all of our people leaving comments, giving us some direction. Y'all are invaluable, and you're driving this yacht just as much as we are.
Well said, Scholar Beta. Well said. Again, as they say in Hawaii, big mahalo nui loa to our listeners, Memory Alpha and Trek Core, and I'm excited for our continued journey together. With that in mind, live long and prosper, and e malama pono. Y'all take care.
Peace and long life, everyone.
This is Captain Kanaka speaking. On behalf of my esteemed colleague at Scholar Beta, we hope you've enjoyed this deluxe version of Captain's Yacht, a Star Trek podcast. This is a podcast done by 2 inner-city high school teachers learning how to make a podcast so we can teach those skills to our students in the fields of social studies and English language arts. If you like what you see and like to see more, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as both me, Captain Kanaka, and my colleague Scholar Beta are new to the podcasting realm and the video production realm, please give us any feedback you deem appropriate. We could definitely use it. So, with that said, live long and prosper, e malama pono, and see you next time.